let's get into the thing we're all here to talk about, which is about UK infrastructure projects, why they're so slow, why they're so costly, what's going on, what's the problem here. Let me just... I hear silence, which is good. I think my door is closed. I really hope it is. Anyway, I always feel very sealed when I have my earphones in. The earphones in rather than headphones, because I don't really know why, to be honest. So, let's talk about this. Why is this the case? Let's talk about my three reasons, and I'm not going to give you academic science behind each of these, but I'm going to back them up with a few different things. Let's go in and actually talk about the three reasons. The three reasons I give in interviews why my projects, but particularly why HS2 as cost has escalated. The number one reason is the lack of political commitment. We just have zero political ability to commit politically, and there are a few things within that as well. We are the most centralized, over-centralized, but certainly the most centralized economy in the world. The amount of power centralized on a very small number of people, as we saw with Sunak unilaterally cancelling the project, is hugely undemocratic. It means that this lack of political commitment means that the contractors will charge more because they don't know whether the project's going to be cancelled, so they need to make their money. That they can't business plan, so they need to get as much money up front as possible. This lack of political commitment just runs through everything. The next one, number two. So this lack of political commitment leads to the lack of a one thing that's critical, absolutely critically necessary. That thing is a long-term plan. Having a plan that you can actually build to, that contractors can go, oh, that's the plan. So we need to employ these people. We can buy this equipment. We can actually think about the future and reduce costs as a result of that. As a result of the lack of a long-term plan, certainly in HS2's case, you end up with massively overburdened scopes. And this is true with other projects as well. Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade, classic example. Same with basically all of the electrification projects in the UK, that all fall under this because they're projects, not programs, of course. So number two is this overburdened scope. And what I mean by that, let's continue using HS2 as the example. Rather than, and I talked about this last week, didn't I? Rather than having a project that is Euston is its own project, because you have a long-term plan, you know that Euston needs to accommodate a certain number of trains, so you can do the Euston approaches and Euston as a single project. Then you do Old Oak Common as its own project. You know what's going to come into Old Oak Common, you know what's going to go out of Old Oak Common. You can build Old Oak Common as its own single project. It doesn't need to be part of a bigger program. You just build it as a single project. And then you can build the bits of rural high-speed line on their own. You can do these sections. Each section is its own thing. You don't need to call 520 kilometres of, whatever it is, 520 kilometres of railway, 530 in fact. You don't need to call 530 kilometres of railway one thing, one project, HS2. No. As a result of that, it becomes harder to cancel it. If you've got all individual bits, it becomes, it's harder to cancel multiple projects. It becomes, the HS2 being called HS2 and isn't the issue, but the fact there is a nebulous scope that means that governments could say, well, we are delivering HS2 when they're not, is a real problem. So this overburdened scope. So and the reason this is when you compare costs in the UK. So that second one is absolutely accounts for an enormous difference, as I'll talk about momentarily, because if you're looking at high-speed lines on the continent, particularly Spain, France, Germany, they're not including new stations. They're not including the major city centre approaches. They're covering. They might well have tunnels for sure. Rural tunnels, absolutely. Lots of the Austrian and German, certainly the German high-speed lines have lots. Italian high-speed lines certainly have lots. No, we're talking about the fact that those, when you do repeat, can be very cheap. We're talking about the city centre stations that are immensely complicated. The approaches are immensely complicated. Those are all within the HS2 scope, whereas those are just not anywhere near the scope of high-speed lines. And look at France. In fact, we'll talk in a bit more detail about the French lines. To France, their high-speed lines are purely the high-speed line out in the rural area, joining up to the main line outside of the city. Very, very different. So. Lots of people asking that. Do chuck a few. In fact, let's go for the third one, and then I'll pause for questions. So, that's number one. Number two. Number three is the industry and delivery body structures. So what do I mean by that? What do I actually mean by this? First of all, what I mean by this is that I need to... Oh, why is my text spacing gone a bit weird? Strange anyway, never mind. I don't know what this space here is. It's a bit weird. Anyway, number 3, industry and delivery body structure. So what do I mean by that? Well, 2 things. Firstly, our construction industry is massively fragmented, way more fragmented than other countries. We rely hugely heavily on SMEs, small and medium enterprises, very small businesses, to deliver stuff. We hire in everything. So we don't have a company that just has all the equipment, that has all the skills, that has all the surveyors. They have to hire in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 subcontractors, multiple layers of subcontractor. Each of those layers adds lawyers, adds contracts, adds cost, and adds delay. So that the industry structure is, the fragmentation of the industry is an enormous extra cost burden on the project costs. But also the delivery body. We have a delivery body that has had to invent itself out of nowhere to just deliver HS2. The rest, because of the lack of a long-term plan, we don't have a delivery body that has been doing high-speed lines for 40 years. We don't have a delivery body that has been doing electrification for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So we haven't learned all the skills, all the knowledge that you pick up. This is particularly true for electrification, where there's a lot of discussion going, well, the cost of electrification is too much, so we can't do electrification. It's like, no. A good example, and Gary particularly points this out, is the amount of paperwork, the amount of documentation required for any given kilometre of electrification. It's like, well, there is that happening, and the costs associated with that happening aren't the reason why we're not doing electrification. The fact we're not doing electrification and haven't had a rolling program of electrification means we've forgotten how much of that we don't need. And it's true for everything to do with the design, but also the construction as well. Having the skilled people, the equipment that you can accelerate the delivery of this stuff with. So these are the 3: lack of political commitment, overburdened scope, and the industry and delivery body structure. So the kind of the organisations that enable you to deliver, build, design, develop, scope the project. These are the fundamental issues.